This little magic powder I'm holding in my hands makes a lot of watches valuable. I'm here to tell you all about it. If you don't know me, my name is Roman Sharf. I've been a watch dealer for over 20 years. If you want to learn more about watches, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the videos that will be coming out in the future. I'm going to talk to you about a company called Danze Cadra. My pronunciation is not the best, but you get the idea. During my recent visit to Geneva, you can check out the full video here. I was actually invited by Ulysse Nardin to visit their facilities on one of the companies that they own, Danze Cadra. They were founded in 1972 by a master enamel maker by the name of Francis Danze. And they were quickly recognized as a leader in creating enamel dials. Now, Francis himself would retire in 1987, but not before his own daughter and son-in-law would join the family business. Ulysse Nardin would then acquire the company in 2011. But what exactly are enamel dials and how they're actually made? This is what this video is about. Now, what is enamel? It's a mixture of silica, minimum, and potash and soda. Now, the fusion of these different components at high temperatures melts and then hardens to a smooth, glassy texture that you see across a lot of these dials. This stuff dates back as far as 3rd millennium BC, and today it's mastered by only a small handful of craftsmen and used to create beautiful handcrafted dials. And Danze uses the 4 main techniques, which I'll explain, to craft their dials. Obviously, you have the grand fou, you have the guilloche, the champlivé, and cloisonné. Starting with grand fou, it's a powder mixture of minerals and metallic oxide, and they're dusted into dials and to create a huge variety of colors. Different metallic oxides produce the distinct colors, such as cobalt for deep blues and greens. Now, the dials are then placed in an oven exceeding 800 degrees for a very specific amount of time, even 1 second too long, and the dials must be restarted from scratch. The margin of error in creating these dials is insane. I asked actually one of the girls that was at the factory, I'm like, well, where's the timer? How do you know when to put it in? How do you know if the oven is too hot? The degrees in exactly 800 degrees. She's like, I do it by feel. Think of a baker that's baking a cake that's been doing it for many, many years and has experience. They sort of get a feel for these things, right? Of course, the result is a smooth, durable finish that is perfect blank canvas for pattern and decorations. Once they get the dial perfect, and again, mind you, this thing goes into the oven 4 times, so there are 4 different layers. And the dial, as it initially goes in, it's actually curved. That way, the enamel takes to it well. And somewhere between the 3rd and the 4th go ahead into the oven, they actually have to flatten the dial. How do you do that? Because it's hot or it's cold, and basically they said if it's too hot, it's gonna stick and ruin the dial. If it's too cold, it's gonna crack. And I'm like, okay, this is not as easy as it looks. Of course, what you're seeing here is the numerals. They're actually applied by what looks like a balloon that goes on top of a plate such as this, takes on the color, and they literally stamp it on. So some of these dials come with sub-dials, right? Because of the different levels, you actually have to do the tiny little sub-dial all of its own to make sure that it matches the big dial. Let's talk about champlivé. You take in a metal surface such as this, and you literally carve the scenery inside this particular dial, right? It takes a skilled engraver to create the intricate pattern that you see here. Then this place is passed to an enameler. And you'll notice that there are different colors here. And what all they're really doing is they're filling in the engraving with the colors. And again, they do this 4 times. Every time that they do it, they have to fill in each color. So it's not done one by one, color by color, because it has to bake evenly at the same time. Each dial can take up to 15 hours to complete. Once all the colors are filled in, they go back through and they will continue the engraving to give it a 3D effect. Because if the different color enamel goes outside of the cavity of the engraving and it mixes with the other, that's it, the dial is ruined. You got to start from scratch. Let's talk about the craft of cloisonné. And a cloisonné is something that most people will often classify all of these different type of dials as such, all 4 different techniques that I'm talking about. But no, it's its own technique. It's also the oldest. You actually etch the image that you're trying to create. After that, you take gold wire. What they do with the gold wire is they actually flatten it, creating a flat wire in order to sort of create walls across the pattern that you just sketched on, right? This is a painstaking process. I actually watched the guy sitting there do it, actually the part of the walls, which is probably the hardest, right? He told me if they're off just a little bit, if they're not 100% perpendicular to the dial, the enamel will fail. Because what do they do next? They now utilize those walls in order to fill in all the colors, keeping them separated, and it goes into the oven again 4 different times. I think it's worth mentioning that prior to installing those walls, a thin layer of enamel is laid onto the blank. Enamel will melt faster than gold, and that gold will sort of sit in that enamel, securing it in place, and then they start filling the stuff in. It's just insanity to achieve the colors, to mix the colors, to get a real alive painting such as this, which then almost looks like somebody outlined the entire painting with tiny pieces of gold. Last, let's talk about guilloche. Now, guilloche, the ancient Greeks and Romans used guilloche to decorate things like doors, windows, door handles, etc. It wasn't until 1680 that the first watch with a guilloche dial was created in Geneva by Pierre Enamel. And the most common thing you hear about Gouache dial is engine turn, right? Because you literally put a blank onto a machine, which you then turn a handle. There's a tool that's installed to engrave the dial, and there are patterns, wheels, sort of wheels that the machine follows in order to create specific patterns. I actually tried that with my friends over at Atelier when I was in Geneva for Watches and Wonders. But we're not talking about Gouache, we're talking about enamel, right? What they come up with is enamel on top of Gouache dials. So they put on the Gouache pattern, and then they create what's called translucent enamel. You start by slowly applying this enamel, again, 4 times into the oven, until what you end up with is a beautiful, beautiful, transparent Gouache dial. Of course, you apply the writing onto the dial, and then ultimately what you end up with is this once you put on the actual markers. And the terminology you've heard is applied markers, because they're literally applied on top of this dial. So why are they so valuable? Obviously, sheer craftsmanship, right? This is a centuries-old tradition. This is all made by hand. Their durability. 100 years from now, this dial won't fade, it won't change color. It will remain as beautiful as the day that it was made. You also have collectability. Because it takes such manual labor, and because it takes such an expert to create this, it takes years of apprenticeship, it takes years of skillful work and years of mistakes in order to do that. The margin of error is extremely high. You know, half of these dials don't even make it, sometimes more, depending on the technique that you're going to use, right? And last but not least, they're usually made in limited editions because of that. 5, 15, 20, maybe 99 best case scenario. Most collectors are used to getting a value horologically first when they're paying that kind of a ticket price for a particular item. So they're expecting a tourbillon, they're expecting some sort of a complications, while all the while not understanding that majority of the cost that went into the watch was actually the beautiful enamel dial itself. I hope that you can subscribe if you're not a subscriber. If you are, hit the like button and also share this with those that you feel may find this content interesting, and I'll see you in the next one.